Dyslexia Association, Mrs. Suzanne Briggs, arrives on the Rock next week. Her visit has been funded by the Gibraltar Dyslexia Support Group, which has organised a series of talks in conjunction with the Education Department. Local group founder Mary Byrne told Susan Clifton-Tucker why Mrs. Briggs was being brought to Gibraltar.
Well, we thought that there was a need for more knowledge onto how to teach dyslexics, and some teachers have actually expressed the desire to have this knowledge available, and we thought Suzanne Briggs was the best person for this job.
Now, she's an authority on dyslexia. Who will she be meeting when she's in Gib, and what sort of programme of events has been planned for her?
Well, on the Monday morning, this Monday, she will be having an in-service for all first school teachers. And during the week, government has very kindly allowed and arranged for her to attend all middle schools and both comprehensive schools, and also is having a session particularly for the special needs teachers. So that is quite comprehensive. And then in the evenings, she will be having lectures. The first lecture, which is on the Monday evening, will be for the general public, and is a lecture that we hope most people will attend, insofar as it's going to be a wider lecture, and will be held at the Loreto Convent from 5 to 6:30 on Monday.
Would you say, Marie, that the Education Department are now more sympathetic and understanding of the problems that dyslexics suffer?
Oh, definitely, definitely. We are finding them very, very receptive. And in fact, we are thinking in terms of once Sue Briggs leaves, to extend her visit in the sense of establishing the RSA course for dyslexics in Gibraltar, for teachers to teach dyslexics in Gibraltar. And we have approached government, and it's in the very, very early stages, but they have not said no to this idea. And in fact, we think that it might be a possibility. So we would then have teachers who have done this RSA diploma course in Gibraltar, and they will be qualified to teach dyslexic children.
At present, are dyslexics actually given extra time when sitting formal exams?
Oh yes, they are. There have been, I think it was 3 children this last GCSE who were given this concession of extra time. And also, if the child is thought to need it, he could actually be read the questions to, or have a scribe, somebody to actually write out the answers for him. So we find that, yes, the government is being very helpful.
How many people in Gibraltar would you say that you know of actually suffer from dyslexia?
If you're talking about children, we have at the moment on our books about 40 children who have been actually diagnosed as being dyslexic. We have a lot more people, especially adults, who think they now realize that what they had been struggling with was dyslexia during all their life, but it had not been diagnosed. So really it's a very wide question and very difficult to actually pinpoint how many.
You mentioned the talk that Sue Briggs is going to give on Monday evening. Is this open to everybody?
Oh yes, it is open to everybody, and the more people who come, the better, because there are many people struggling with this problem who are not aware, and you are bound to have somebody within your family or within your working environment who is at the moment dyslexic and might not even know that he is. And it is very important, and in fact people are very pleased when they can recognize what the problem is, and it can help them a lot to overcome it. So I think it is important that as many people as possible attend this lecture.
Top Model 94 will take place on...
Three weeks ago, Suzanne Briggs, an educational consultant to the British Dyslexia Association, paid a visit to Gibraltar. She was hosted by the local dyslexia support group and had the blessing of the Education Department. The aims of her lecture tour were to increase awareness in parents and teachers of the new methods in educating children with learning difficulties. A number of clinics and lectures for teachers were very well attended, as well as those for parents and the general public. From all accounts, the week was a great success, the culmination of tireless work by our dyslexia support group. We asked Douglas Cumming what had been achieved.
Right, well, the main purpose of bringing Suzanne out was to give particularly the primary school teachers and the teachers who are able to get to the children at an early stage in their life, to build an awareness in them as to what dyslexia actually is and how they can tackle it and how they can approach it. We feel that that's been very successfully tackled, and there's a far broader awareness amongst the teachers now than there was before. So that we're very happy with that. Another thing which has been achieved, which I think is very important as well, and has come as an added benefit to the whole thing, the whole exercise, is our own, in bringing this out, our relationships with the Gibraltar Department of Education has improved tremendously. We've been able to work out a good working relationship with them. They've been very helpful to us, and I feel that we've also been able to give something to them. And there's a much more positive atmosphere about the whole, tackling the whole problem, which of course can only benefit the children at the end of the day.
Okay, so in order to better understand the nature of the learning difficulties known as dyslexia, we asked Suzanne Briggs to explain it in the simplest terms.
Dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty, which is an organizational problem, and it gives children at school an enormous amount of problems with learning to read, spell and write. It can also affect understanding, short-term memory, getting things in the right order, sequencing, and hand skills, writing, being able to write clearly on paper and putting their ideas down on paper. The British Dyslexia Association at the moment would estimate 10% of the population are dyslexic, but dyslexia can come in varying degrees, and I think about 4% may be picked up and identified. The others struggle through on their own, and many reach university level before their problems are picked up and they're given any help.
Sheila Lee is a child psychologist and a teacher. So we asked her what was the psychological impact on a child who perhaps has the ability but yet is unable to learn at the same speed of other children.
Well, the impact is as varied as the difficulties themselves, and there's a lot of factors involved. For instance, a child's personality, the support that they get, or the feeling of frustration that people are not understanding their difficulties. But very briefly, there is an increase in being tense and being frustrated, and a decrease in their own value of themselves, their own self-esteem, and how they see themselves in comparison to their peers in class.
Are there many children who are diagnosed as dyslexic after a child psychologist has been called in, perhaps because of behavior or poor performance at school?
Yes, it can quite frequently be the case that a child psychologist is called in because of a behavioural difficulty. Perhaps the child is presenting a discipline problem at school, or is displaying emotional problems at home, and the family can't cope. And then when you investigate the situation, you find that at the root of it is a learning problem, and the child is avoiding facing the learning problem, or has no way to explain it to someone, and so they cover it by different forms of behaviour.
Wesley Cumming and Stuart Byrne both suffer from dyslexia, and they told us what it was like to be at a disadvantage in school.
Well, when I had reading problems, I hardly never read out loud. And when the teacher told me to read out loud, I tried to read fast, so the words don't come out very clear, you know, so that people don't laugh at me. And
the problems were reading out loud, reading to myself even was very difficult, writing, and a lot of other problems.
Once your friends at school became aware of the problems, you didn't have any problems, no?
Well, my friends now, they laugh at me, but I mean, when I write spelling wrong, they laugh at me, but I laugh with them because I know I'm dyslexic and I do my best, and
They laugh because it's funny. They don't really laugh at you. They laugh because it's funny, but, you know, they're not laughing at you, basically.
It's badly spelt and it comes out strange.
It's a funny word, isn't it? So, Wesley, tell me, now that things are sort of under control and the teachers, your parents and your friends are aware of your learning difficulties, is life a much happier one for you now at school?
Well, easier. I find it a bit easier.
But are you happier?
Yes.
You're happier. And you feel you're doing as best as you can?
Yeah, I try to do the best I can. Yeah. Maybe some things I don't, but a few things I do.
You're confident, yes? Yes. So what advice do you think you'd give your friends who had similar problems?
I don't know.
What about you, Stuart? What advice would you give friends if you knew some of your friends had reading difficulties and you thought they were dyslexic? What would you think would help them best?
Well, I would tell them tricks that I've learned over the years. They'll probably learn their own tricks. We would share tricks, no? Tell them that people might laugh at them, but it doesn't matter. Get on with life.
John Mackintosh Hall, Tuesday the 12th of April, 5 p.m. Hardly stopping for tea after school, a room full of special needs teachers and other educators take in the first talk by Suzanne Briggs. Minutes earlier, Wynne Newton, National Curriculum Head of Special Needs UK, had introduced Susan. A few days later, we caught up with the lecture train at the Loreto Convent, where again there was a room full of attentive teachers soaking up the relaxed and classy style of imparting knowledge that Suzanne Briggs models her talks upon. Patsy Scott is an education advisor who worked very closely with the dyslexia support group in order to make the lecture clinics by Suzanne Briggs accessible to teachers. We asked her what conclusions had the education department and its teachers reached at the end of that busy week.
I think it should go on record that the response by the teachers was wonderful, because they had to, it was voluntary, their attendance at the in-service sessions, or the clinics as you call them in the evenings, was on a voluntary basis and after a hard-working day. So I was very gratified from the very beginning as to the numbers of people
was excellent.
that had put the names down, no, for these. I myself didn't attend all of them. I can say that, again, there the response was varied. In some cases, some teachers have found them of great benefit and want to know more. And others have said, well, I was doing a lot of this already, you know. So it's very much up to individual teachers to sort of ascertain exactly the degree that it has been of benefit.
What they've gotten out.
Yes.
Now, has the increased awareness perhaps opened a can of worms? You know, I mean,
I don't know. I would like to hope not, because I feel we're in a profession that should feel that there's always room to improve and more to learn, and it was in that spirit that the dyslexia support group were given the go-ahead to enable our teachers to have this inset session. And we, all teachers will want very much to work very closely with parents, and the dyslexia support group are obviously made up primarily of very concerned parents.
Local optician Terence Moss recently went on a course to learn the science of colored lenses that can help children with reading difficulties.
I think at the end of the day, what's important is the patient assessment of the situation. In other words, if you're giving color and the patient is actually gaining some benefit from it, if the patient can read for longer, if the patient can write more comfortably, then I don't think the actual color necessarily is that important. As long as it helps, it doesn't really matter. There are also possible theories, in fact, that the person might eventually adapt to that colour and move on to a colour very similar to that one, i.e. the next down the line. So I suppose really at the end of the day, the idea of sending them over for an assessment would be so they could come back and say, I need this particular shade, this particular tint. But at the end of the day, you have to try it out with the actual text and normal lighting and so on and so forth. So I don't think that would be the approach. I think the approach would be to actually find if the person can be helped with colour, and then, as I say, possibly a little bit longer, more time-consuming, I would try and find out which particular area of the colour visual space we're talking about, and then try and prescribe that. And if it doesn't work totally, or if we find, for example, that a person might be able to say, read well, but find it difficult to write, then we know that we're getting close, and we would have to make slight adjustments to the intensity of the tint.
Coping with the frustrations of dyslexic children can be an equally frustrating and taxing affair for their parents. Fiona Culato went through it all before she decided with her husband that it was best to put her daughter into specialised education in England.
It is. I think frustration for them is dreadful. In my case, and I'm sure many other people have gone through the same thing, yes, my daughter would get very frustrated. She would actually cry and she would say, you know, but why, Mummy, can't I do it? She would get terribly upset because she said she knew she could do just as well as other children in her class. But as far as putting it on paper, and she also had reading problems, she just couldn't do it. But then they're very clever. You know, a story I've told many people is with poetry. Dyslexia is a short-term memory problem. So poetry for dyslexics is very hard. And we used to spend hours trying to learn poetry. We'd sing it, we'd do everything trying to learn this poetry. And one day, I couldn't get her to, she couldn't get it, poetry. So I said to her, come on, we'll try something else. And she turned around, she was about 9 years old. And she said to me, Mummy, don't worry about it. She said, I work out where I am in the class. And she said, the teacher always goes in the same order, and we only need to know 2 lines. So she used to work out where she was in the poem, where her place was, and she just learnt those 2 lines. They
So
cover themselves.
It shows that dyslexic people have an amazing ability.
Yes.
I mean, they're
Yes.
intelligent.
Oh, yes, they are intelligent.
They're highly intelligent.
Yes, yes. They cover themselves in incredible ways, yes, and that's a typical example. She would calculate which lines she needed to learn, and rather than learning the whole poem, she'd just learn the 2 lines.
But obviously, to round up, Fiona, the dramatic change that you've noticed, of course, has got to be that psychologically she seems now to be more in control of her emotions. She knows what the problem is, and she knows that she's receiving education that helps her overcome those problems.
No, I think that is it at the end of the day. I mean, she's a much happier child now. She's a more confident child, you know, I think it's marvellous what's happening now. I mean, here in Gibraltar, there's such a positive attitude, and I think it's wonderful that children are going to be getting the help that they need, yes.
Well, first of all, of course, there are the parents who don't know that the children is dyslexic. They, and I can speak from experience, of course, the main problem there is frustration and worry and not knowing knowing something is wrong, but not knowing what it is. And very often the child is put under pressure which he should or she shouldn't have to go through. So that can cause a lot of tension in the family, and that is once the problem is recognized, diagnosed, then a lot of that tension will go, and they're replaced by a sense, at least a sense of direction, a sense of knowing, right, well, this is the problem. It's not just that the child is lazy or couldn't care less. He wants to try, but he can't. Then the whole thing changes, and it's just a question of being able to find ways of meeting that child's specific educational needs. In Gibraltar, up until present time, there's been very little specifically that we could offer dyslexic children. So really, what we were able to do has been stopped at the psychologist's report. So once we've got a report, we know what the child needs, then the problem is, what do you do with it? How do you apply it to that child? And this is what we're currently working on right now.
How many dyslexic children are there in Gibraltar? I mean, as far as the dyslexia support group is aware.
Right. Well, we have on our lists approximately 44 children who have been diagnosed by a psychologist, educational psychologist, and recognized as being dyslexic.
Ages ranging from?
Ages ranging from about 6 to 14 or 15, so throughout the whole school age period. Of course, there are bound to be many more other children outside who have never been assessed and whose parents and who they themselves are still struggling with something which they might not know exists and which has help is available for.
Even more and writing it.
Monica Coombs, now a successful part-time travel consultant, went through her entire education with dyslexic learning difficulties and only discovered the complex nature of her disadvantages when she was already working.
At the beginning it was very difficult, but now I've overcome it by repeating like numbers, like telephone numbers or credit card numbers over to the client, which looks professional anyway. And apart from that, my self-esteem, I feel good about my job, I feel good about myself. So, I mean, that covers more or less my little problem that I have.
Now, what would be your best advice to young people perhaps trying to overcome learning difficulties, you know, perhaps dyslexic people? What do you think is the best asset?
I think not to use it as an excuse, but to use it as an asset, as a challenge. And when you got something to challenge for, you are optimist and you fight for it to become better than the normal average person. As
an association, you've managed to raise the public awareness of dyslexia perhaps 100-fold since you started a few years back. Do you feel perhaps that your mission as an association is now complete?
No, not by a long way. I mean, our initial point for getting together has been achieved. I mean, like you say, the awareness has increased tremendously, and that is very important.
And the education department has taken it on board as well.
That's right. I mean, they're beginning to recognise the existence of the problem, and they're being able to cooperate with us and with the parents and the children. Now, of course, from now on, what we're trying to achieve is more actual help, more specific, specifically trained teachers, dyslexia-trained teachers who are able to teach the children, to have them available to all the children, so that it's not just those who can afford lessons, private lessons, will be able to go, to have things available for them, both within the school system and also outside, if necessary, to be able to we're trying to get together a unit where children can go to after school hours and or get the extra help they need. So there's a lot to be done, and there always will be.
People like Monica Coombs and countless others who may have gone through their life experiencing disadvantages in learning will soon be only a memory of an era when dyslexia was not recognized for what it is. Children like Wesley and Stuart, although going through the same traumas as all dyslexics, are now taken well into account so that their lives are made easier by increased awareness of their needs. One can take comfort in the fact that although 10% of school populations are said to be dyslexic in the UK, there are only 44 diagnosed children here so far. With a school population of around 5,000, that is less than 1%. So we must have friends in high places blessing our children.